In the monastery, silence is not only golden, it is essential. Some people say, "I don't like having visitors." They whisper it like a confession, as if it signals a flaw. But I say to you, observe what this feeling points toward, not with judgment, but with awareness. When the soul recoils from the presence of others, it is not always antisocial. Sometimes it is sacred, a sign that your inner temple seeks restoration. Solitude is not a weakness, it is where the soul digests what the world has fed it. But beware, solitude can heal, but isolation can imprison. So ask yourself, do you avoid visitors because your spirit longs to grow in silence, or because it fears being seen? Many people fill their calendars because they are afraid of the silence. But if you can sit with yourself for hours, with no distraction, no noise, and not suffer, then you are meeting your true self. And when you meet your true self, you will begin to see, you don't reject the world, you simply no longer need it to complete you. The path of the practitioner is not one of escape, but of alignment. When your energy is scattered, even the presence of others can overwhelm you. But when your energy is centered, you can welcome or decline visitors, both from a place of peace. So remember this, the way you treat your space, your time, your solitude, says more about your soul than any words. And if you feel discomfort in company, ask not what is wrong with them. What part of me is still unsettled in the presence of others? Because when the soul is clear, even the noise of the world cannot disturb the silence within. This is not withdrawal, this is mastery. This is the way. In a world that glorifies constant connection, endless notifications, and perpetual accessibility, solitude is often mistaken for a weakness. But this misunderstanding is rooted in fear, the fear of being alone with oneself. When someone says, "I don't like having visitors," the immediate reaction from society is concern or judgment, as if something must be wrong. But perhaps nothing is wrong. Perhaps something is deeply right. Solitude is not a void to be filled, but a presence to be felt. It is not the absence of company, but the presence of self. In the stillness of an empty room, where there is no one to impress and no roles to play, the soul begins to whisper. Only when we retreat from the outer noise can we finally hear the inner truth. This is why solitude, true intentional solitude, is not a punishment, but a purification. Solitude becomes sacred when it is chosen, when it is embraced not as escape, but as alignment. In the martial arts temple, we rise before dawn not to run from people, but to meet ourselves before the world interrupts. The practitioner bows not only to the master, but to the silence, because it is the silence that becomes the mirror. In the stillness, you are confronted with all the clutter the outside world allowed you to avoid, your unprocessed thoughts, unhealed emotions, and the chaos you buried under the noise. Yet, to face them without distraction, this is courage. This is practice. In the absence of visitors, you begin to notice how you walk, how you breathe, how your thoughts move. You realize the most important visitor you've neglected to invite in is yourself. And once you become comfortable in that presence, you begin to understand why some people choose solitude as their sanctuary. Many avoid solitude because they have not yet learned how to be with themselves without discomfort. They believe that being alone means being lonely. But loneliness is not a condition of the body. It is a condition of the mind. You can be surrounded by a crowd and feel utterly abandoned. And you can be in solitude, yet feel deeply connected to life. Solitude allows you to detach from roles and expectations. It strips away identity masks, father, friend, worker, entertainer, and asks, who are you when no one is watching? If you struggle to answer, then your aversion to solitude is not about visitors, it's about the fear of that question. The sacredness of solitude lies in its ability to bring you to that edge, where you no longer perform, but simply exist. And in that existence something eternal awakens. It is not found in approval or applause, but in presence. the presence of you. To value solitude is to honor the space in which the soul breathes. Not everyone is ready for this, and that is okay. But for those who are drawn to silence, to stillness, to the simplicity of an undisturbed room, know that your preference is not a defect. It is a sign that you are attuning to deeper rhythms. It means your soul is no longer fed by noise but by nuance, no longer energized by chaos, but by clarity. It is an early step in the path toward inner mastery. The world may not understand, and perhaps it never will, but that is not your burden. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself, and if the absence of visitors gives your spirit room to unfold, then let it unfold. That space, that sacred space, is where your transformation begins. There is a subtle yet profound difference between solitude and isolation, and failing to recognize it can lead the practitioner astray. Solitude is a conscious choice. It is an intentional turning inward to cultivate inner stillness, clarity, and presence. Isolation, on the other hand, is often an unconscious reaction, a retreat driven by fear, shame, or disconnection. While both may appear identical from the outside, a person alone in a room, their inner dimensions are completely different. One is empowering, the other is depleting. One brings us closer to who we truly are. The other distances us from life itself. To distinguish between the two is to understand your own intent. Are you choosing this moment of aloneness because your soul is asking for quiet nourishment, or are you avoiding the world because you fear what it reflects back at you? Solitude is like sitting beside a clear lake in the early morning. The air is still, and your reflection stares back at you with honesty. There is no fear in that space, only truth, even if that truth is difficult. This is the ground where inner strength is cultivated. It is where the monk returns again and again, not to hide, but to reconnect. But isolation is different. It is like closing yourself inside a room and turning off all the lights. You believe you are protecting yourself, but in fact, you are shrinking. Isolation feeds on avoidance, avoiding emotion, avoiding connection, avoiding the possibility of vulnerability. The walls built around you are not boundaries of peace, but barriers of fear. Over time, this kind of separation corrodes the spirit, creating a hollow space where life struggles to grow. In that darkness, the mind begins to distort reality. You no longer withdraw to reflect. You withdraw because you believe the world has no place for you. This is why awareness is crucial. The practitioner must ask regularly, why am I alone right now? There is no judgment in the answer, only observation. If the answer is because the heart longs to recenter, to hear its own rhythm again, then solitude is a medicine. But if the answer is rooted in bitterness, resentment, or escape, then it is isolation masquerading as peace. Sometimes we even convince ourselves that we are choosing solitude when deep down we are just too afraid to trust again. We use the language of independence to mask our wounds. But remember, true solitude is not defensive. It does not shut the world out with anger. It simply steps aside in gentleness, like the river curving around a rock. There is no force, no pushing, just clarity. In this clarity, we begin to see ourselves honestly, and that honesty leads to healing. To grow on the inner path, we must learn to hold this distinction with care. Solitude is a teacher, one that requires discipline and patience. Isolation is a warning, a signal that some part of us has closed its doors to life. When we become too comfortable in that isolation, we begin to forget how to connect, how to express, how to trust. This is not the way. Even the monk who lives in seclusion does so with the intent to return to the world in service, clearer, stronger, more compassionate. The goal is not to detach forever, but to return whole, to sit in solitude and emerge with insight, to be alone and yet never lonely. This is what it means to walk the path with wisdom, to know when your soul is resting and when it is retreating. The difference will shape not only your growth, but the quality of your life. Every external environment we create, our room, our schedule, our relationships, is a direct reflection of our internal world. If you look closely at the space around you, you will begin to notice patterns, cluttered rooms, mirroring cluttered thoughts, chaotic routines, reflecting inner restlessness, overly decorated surroundings, signaling a deep longing to be seen. The way you keep your space is not just a matter of aesthetics or habit, it reveals the state of your spirit. In the monastery, we do not keep the training hall clean out of ritual alone. We clean it as a form of respect, not just for the space, but for the clarity it symbolizes. Every sweep of the floor, every folded robe, is a silent declaration, my inner world is in order. And so if someone finds themselves uncomfortable with visitors, it is often because their space, physical or mental, is not yet ready to be seen. Not because of shame, but because the soul intuitively knows when it needs time to become whole again. Many people go through life unaware of the energy they cultivate in their environments. They surround themselves with noise, with distractions, with constant interruptions, not realizing that these are symptoms of a mind that has not yet learned to be still. If you find yourself avoiding visitors, ask yourself not just why don't I want people here, but also what would they find if they entered? Would they walk into a room of peace or into a storm? Would they sense harmony or heaviness? These are not questions to invite guilt or shame, but awareness. Because if your space is not one that brings you peace, then others will naturally feel that dissonance as well. And when you are not at ease in your own environment, visitors begin to feel like intrusions, not because of who they are, but because of what their presence reveals, that your space may not yet be a sanctuary. The truth is, when the soul is calm and centered, it naturally extends that calm into the environment. Simplicity becomes beautiful, stillness becomes magnetic. The energy of the space becomes welcoming, not because it is filled with decoration or luxury, but because it carries the vibration of someone who is at peace. This is why monks live with so little. Not because they reject material things, but because their inner wealth does not depend on them. When you enter a monk's room, there is nothing to distract the eye, yet everything aligns the mind. The bed is placed with intention. The teacup has its place. Even the window is not just for light but for perspective. Every item is part of the practice. And so when you reflect on your own space, your home, your routine, your emotional atmosphere, ask yourself, is this a reflection of my highest self? If not, the work is not to change the room first, but the state of being that shaped it. This principle applies not only to physical space, but to the invisible space of your life, your boundaries, your time, your energy. Who do you allow in? What do you tolerate? What are you constantly adjusting yourself to accommodate? These are not small questions. They point directly to the state of your soul. People often speak of protecting their peace, but few examine why that peace feels so fragile to begin with. A visitor who disrupts your energy may not be the problem. The deeper issue may be that your own energy is not yet stabilized. When the soul is unsettled, every interaction feels like a disturbance. But when the soul is grounded, you can remain at peace even in the presence of storms. Therefore, if you feel a constant need to be alone, perhaps your inner temple is asking for renovation, not because you are broken, but because you are in the sacred process of rebuilding. Your space in all its forms is not just where you live, it is how you live, and how you live is who you are becoming. In a world that moves at the speed of urgency, stillness is often misunderstood as passivity. People equate motion with meaning and noise with importance, but the ancient traditions teach something very different. True mastery begins when one can be still, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, energetically. To sit in silence without reaching for a distraction, without needing to perform, explain or impress, this is a rare ability. Most people are not afraid of boredom. They are afraid of meeting themselves in that boredom, because when the external world quiets down, the internal world gets loud, and that is when the real practice begins. Stillness is not a lack of movement. It is the deliberate withholding of reaction. It is the space between impulse and action, and within that space lies all the wisdom you seek. Self-mastery is not about controlling others, nor about becoming untouchable to pain. It is about understanding your own inner currents so deeply that you no longer get swept away by them. When you sit in stillness, you begin to observe your mind with clarity. You see the cravings that pull you outward, the fears that contract your heart, the insecurities that rise like whispers. Most people run from this awareness. They distract themselves with noise, conversations, entertainment, endless planning, anything to avoid confronting what lives inside them. But the one who commits to stillness commits to the warrior's path, because it takes far more strength to sit with discomfort than to escape from it. It takes far more courage to do nothing externally while transforming everything internally. In this space of quiet, the practitioner begins to recognize the vast difference between reaction and response, and the power of choice is born. In the monastery, the practice of seated meditation is not just an exercise, it is a doorway. The posture itself is a metaphor, upright, balanced, and unmoving. No matter what thoughts or feelings pass through, we learn that the body can be still, even when the mind is chaotic. And eventually, through patience and discipline, the mind too begins to mirror the body, becoming still, clear, and undisturbed. This is not achieved through force but through surrender. A gentle, attentive surrender to the present moment. When this stillness takes root, something profound emerges: presence, not the kind of presence that is loud and attention-seeking, but the quiet presence of someone who is entirely here. A presence that does not need words to be felt. That presence is a reflection of inner mastery, the result of countless hours of choosing silence over stimulation, reflection over reaction, alignment over approval. It cannot be faked. It cannot be bought. It can only be cultivated. Stillness, then, is not an escape from life. It is an intimate encounter with it. The one who can remain still while chaos surrounds them is not avoiding life. They are engaging with it at the highest level. They are grounded in themselves, not swayed by every passing emotion or external trigger. This kind of presence transforms relationships, work, and even suffering. It teaches you to listen without judgment, to act without ego, to move without resistance. And when you no longer need to run from yourself, you no longer need the world to constantly distract or affirm you. This is why so many people who value stillness also value solitude. Because in solitude you can train yourself to be still, and in stillness you begin to remember who you truly are. Beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the illusions. It is there, in that vast quiet center, that true self-mastery begins to reveal itself, not as something to achieve, but as something to return to. When we interact with others, we often believe we are simply engaging with their personality, their habits, their energy. But in truth, much of what we perceive in another person is a reflection of ourselves. The discomfort we feel in the presence of others rarely originates solely from them. Instead, it often reveals something within us that is unresolved. In this way, every encounter becomes a mirror, reflecting back our fears, our impatience, our insecurities, and even our unacknowledged desires. If a person's presence irritates you, ask not, why are they like this? But what within me is being disturbed? This shift in inquiry transforms relationships from emotional battlegrounds into opportunities for self-understanding. The external world becomes your training ground, and through this training you come to know the depth of your own conditioning. When we avoid visitors or retreat from social connection, we often rationalize our withdrawal by pointing to the flaws of others. They're too loud, they drain my energy, or I just don't connect with people. But beneath this reasoning lies something subtler. The presence of others disrupts our illusion of inner peace. It exposes how stable or unstable we truly are. In solitude, it is easier to appear composed, disciplined, and enlightened. But the moment another person enters our space, their energy interacts with our own. Suddenly, the parts of ourselves we have carefully hidden begin to surface. We may feel judged, misunderstood, or irritated, not because the other person is doing anything wrong, but because our ego feels exposed. If we are brave enough to observe this reaction without immediately defending or withdrawing, we begin to uncover the parts of ourselves still seeking healing. This is why advanced spiritual practice cannot remain confined to solitude. While solitude teaches you how to meet yourself, interaction teaches you how to remain yourself in the presence of another. A strong soul does not require control over the environment to maintain peace. Rather, it remains grounded regardless of the energy it encounters. Visitors are not intrusions. They are invitations to refine your practice. Can you listen to someone's story without the urge to interrupt or fix? Can you remain calm when someone expresses anger or confusion? Can you stay rooted in your values even when others disagree with you? These are the questions that presence asks of you. And when you begin to answer them with grace, your discomfort around others begins to dissolve. Not because people change, but because you have changed your relationship to the mirror they hold up to you. Over time, you begin to welcome the presence of others not as a threat to your peace, but as a teacher for your growth. You understand that every person who enters your life, whether briefly or for a lifetime, is offering you a reflection of some kind. Some will show you your capacity for patience, others will awaken old wounds. Some will inspire you to rise higher, others may tempt you to fall back. All of it is part of the practice. The mature practitioner does not push away the mirror simply because they do not like the reflection. Instead, they bow to it. They use it to adjust their posture, their thoughts, their heart. This is the art of transformation, to meet yourself through others without losing yourself in them. And in doing so, you no longer fear visitors. You no longer shrink from connection, because you have realized the presence of others no longer threatens your inner world, it reveals it. And so when you say, "I don't like having visitors," let it no longer be a whisper of shame, but an invitation to inquiry. Let it guide you inward, not as a retreat from the world, but as a sacred return to the self. Because to understand your relationship with solitude, with stillness, with space, and with others is to understand your soul. Do not rush to label yourself. You are not antisocial. You are not broken. You are becoming aware, and awareness, when practiced with patience, becomes wisdom. So honor your silence, examine your discomfort, cleanse your space, master your stillness, and welcome the mirrors that life offers, even when they arrive in the form of another human being. Whether you choose to open the door or keep it closed, let it be done not from fear but from clarity, not from avoidance but from alignment. The path of the peaceful warrior is not paved with noise or approval, but with quiet steps and conscious choices. And in those choices, you will find your soul. This is the way.